Normalcy may soon return to Sudan after the warring parties agreed to a 72-hour truce. The witness said gunfire could be heard this morning while Arab, Asian and Western nations were racing to extract their citizens from the country. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the agreement first and said it followed 2 days of intense negotiations. The two sides have not abided by several previous temporary truce deals. Now, for more perspective on this, let's turn to former Nigerian Consul General and from Atlanta, Georgia, Ambassador Joe Keshi. It's good to have you on Arise News, Ambassador.
Good afternoon, and how are you today?
We're doing amazing. Now, let's go straight into it. We are aware of the 72-hour ceasefire that is supposed to kick off today. And the Nigerian government has also promised that it will be getting its Nigerian citizens out of Sudan starting today. However, what we're seeing is a case where, because the airspace is closed, we're having to look at this rescue operation carried out through, land, and Nigerians having to be evacuated either through Egypt or even Chad that shares the border with Nigeria. Now, I want to find out if you believe that what the plans that are on ground now have, the response has been fast enough. Do you think that this should have happened before? Are we right on timing? And what is the best way to make sure that the Nigerian government can provide a safe corridor for this trip to happen?
Well, look, if you look at the situation in Sudan today, virtually every country in the world that has citizens in Sudan are scrambling to get their citizens, out of harm's way. That's a clear indication that the fighting caught everybody unawares and everybody unprepared. But in terms of emergency preparation, some countries certainly are well prepared and they are ready to go off at any given time than some other countries like Nigeria. If you watch some of the evacuation done by some countries, you see, C-13 transport airplanes flying into Khartoum and lifting out people. I know we have a couple of C-13 transport, military transport systems. You see them all the time at Muritala, International Airport. You don't even know whether they are healthy enough to take off the ground and things like that. But the truth of the matter is that we in this country must develop a template for emergencies like this. This is not the first time. Look, it's very tedious from what we have heard. It's very tedious going away from the capital from anywhere to any border, whether to the Chadian border or to the Egyptian border or to the Ethiopian border. It's a traumatic experience for those involved. And so that makes it imperative that after this, that the Nigerian government should actually have a template and have a section, particularly of the military itself, ready. That once there is an emergency like this, they spring into action and move in very quickly to lift Nigerians out of harm's way. There's no other way of doing this, but, ensuring that we are prepared well at home. And once it happens anywhere in the world, particularly in the African continent, where you experience this thing so often, you just send out your air force to bring back your people. And of course, the Navy, the Americans and other countries are moving their ships closer to Sudan to be able to lift out people.
Thank you, Ambassador. Of course, I'm just, what piqued my attention, what got my attention is what you said about getting a template so that in the event of, subsequent events like this, we're better prepared. Do you think any vital lessons or crucial steps were taken following the Ukraine crisis that prepared the Nigerian government for better response based on what we're seeing now?
You are referring to Ukraine, which is about 2 years ago. You've forgotten Liberia, you've forgotten Sierra Leone, you've forgotten Guinea, you've forgotten Ghana. In all this, we were not prepared. And it happens about the same time. And I can tell you a lot more because I was in Sierra Leone. I was responsible. I was the officer on the ground responsible for helping to take, Nigerians out of that country. Eventually, it was the Americans that came to our rescue. You know, we were only able to send in one plane, and we never sent in any other plane. So this is what I'm saying. From my own experience, we need a template. We need a section of the military to be trained, the Air Force in particular, and the Navy to be trained and ready. Once you have situations like this, they take off. Like the rest of the world, at least everybody is seeing it on the international global networks. You are seeing C-35, sea transport planes arrive in Sudan, taking out people. The ships are moving closer to Sudan to be able. These are naval ships. They are not commercial ships. Every time we depend on, Air Peace, and I sincerely hope they are paying him back for his good works. But the truth of the matter is that we need a template. You know, this country must be ready for all kinds of emergencies. Not just when it happens. This is not the first time we are going through this debate. When the Ukrainian thing started, I was on your network. We're not saying anything new. And that's 2 years ago. And 2 years after, we are back to the same thing. So we must be prepared. Look, the ministry itself, I know the ministry is always, because they keep trying to find out what can be done and so on. But they're also handicapped. They don't have enough resources to take care of everybody in that place. So we must be ready at home, because the greatest help to those people outside should come from the country itself, from inside the country, not from outside. And even if you send people to Egypt, to Ethiopia, to Chad, are Nigerian military planes or Nigerian aircrafts in those countries ready to bring them home immediately? Or they have to sleep at the border or sleep in Chad, Ethiopia, Egypt for another couple of days or weeks or months before they are brought back home? This is why we must honestly take this thing seriously, that it's nobody's fault that these emergencies do, spring up suddenly. But what I'm trying to say is very simple. We've gone through this many times. Even before Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, and the rest, we've had this kind of experience. So what do? Let's have a template. Let's have a preparedness that when it happens again, we are not caught napping, and we're able to move in very quickly and get our people out of harm's way.
Definitely. I mean, talking about the template, it almost seems as is what happened in South Africa when we're seeing xenophobic attacks. We're seeing private individuals, like in this situation, the CEO of Air Peace saying that he's willing to step in as long as, there's a level of comfort for the people that would be going to pick the Nigerians up from that location. But I want to know, the fact that the projection was that most students and others who want to evacuate are about 5,000. But the plan on ground now is to evacuate about 2,650 to about 2,800 immediately, including the families of embassy and staff. What would you say to, the rest of the families and Nigerian citizens who would have to remain in Sudan until they could find their way out of it? What should be the safety and security measures that they should take while they wait to be evacuated?
Well, look, if they can just find, depending on where they are, where they live, if they can stay indoors and keep their ears on the ground, for now at least, there's not enough troop movement in within some of these places. The crazy generals, as I call them, are shooting one another from distances, but there's no way of, there's always a danger of somebody could accidentally be hit. So the best thing is, stay indoors and keep your ears on the ground. Once you have the opportunity to get out, get out. And unfortunately, I really don't know how if every member of staff of the embassy has been evacuated. But the traditional thing is that for non-essential staffs to be evacuated and one or two remain to be able to help and assist Nigerians in the territory. This is what almost all embassies do anyway. So I sincerely hope that we are doing the same thing in Khartoum. But there's not that way. Stay away from areas where you think you could be hit or you could run into difficulties. And once you have the opportunity, head for the closest border to you. That would be my advice to the students.
Noted, Ambassador. And I'd like to expand this conversation beyond, what's happening with Nigerians in Sudan, unfortunately. But we understand reports suggest that Libyan militia and Egypt's military back up opposite sides in this conflict. I'd like to ask you what you think, the involvement of regional forces, how you think the involvement in this crisis is complicating it even further.
Look, it's not only regional forces that are involved. The longer this crisis stay on, I fear that it could be internationalized, So it's not only regional, it's not only regional forces. The militia, what do they call them? The Special Armed Forces Group, or the created by El Bashir, they have strong connections to, to Russians, to the Russians, The Chinese are there, the Americans are there. So everybody you can think of, are right there. Look, a couple of years ago, when there was a serious crisis like this in the Sudan, Nigeria stepped in. We are reminded by friends in a conversation that we'll be having, on our platform. And they brought the warring parties to Nigeria and helped sort out the problems. Unfortunately, I'm not too sure we are prepared for that today. I'm not too sure we have that capacity to, I'm not even sure whether we have any link to anybody in the hierarchy of the government, today. But for me, I keep saying that what is going on in Sudan should also compel the international community, irrespective of whether you back one leader or the other, to begin to think of punishing these leaders. Look, over 100 and something innocent people, Sudanese, have died. We are not talking of foreigners who could also die on trying to get out of Sudan. So it is time we make it clear to some leaders that create these unfortunate situations that if people are killed innocently because of their desire for power, they should be arrested. We should ensure that eventually they are not allowed to rule Sudan, but that they should head towards the International Court for Crime Against Humanity. These guys cannot, for goodness sake, we need to stop African leaders interested in power, in employing tactics like this at the expense of innocent people being killed, at the expense of a couple of foreigners dying on the road trying to find their ways out. This is a crime against humanity that the military in Sudan are engaging, and we should honestly begin to think of sending the leaders in particular to the International Court of Justice. And maybe when the global community, particularly the African nations, have the courage to do this, maybe you see less of this kind of sporadic violence between military or people interested in power in the continent. Something must have to be done. Something must be done to solve this kind of madness for power in this continent.
When we begin to draw comparisons, that's not the situation right now in Nigeria, thankfully. But when we start to draw comparisons, how does the crisis in Sudan affect Nigeria's national security interest? And what steps can we begin to take to ensure our own security in the face of regional instability?
If you remember what happened in Libya a couple of years ago, it affected our national security interest. There are those who strongly believe that some of the heavy weapons that were used in this country, particularly by Boko Haram and the rest of the, destabilizers that we have experienced in the last couple of years, that the arms were those that the arms came from Libya. And if this continues, now you did mention that some regional interests, regional groups, militia groups are getting involved. And this, once you expand it, you are not sure exactly where it will end. And the flow of arms into Nigeria particularly, but more like the ECOWAS sub-region, is one of the reasons for instability in this part of the world. So one way or the other, we can only hope that based on our experience with Libya and our inability to deal with the Chadian government to close the border against the flow of illicit arms and weapons, that we will begin to watch very closely and ensure that that does not happen again, that some of the arms that might just begin to flow out of Sudan does not find its way to Nigeria. I sincerely hope that our military and our intelligence agencies and the other security agencies can work on this.
Noted, Ambassador. And when it comes to mediation, Israel has made an offer, and we've also seen similar offers not too long ago. Who do you think is in the best position to mediate between these factions?
I've always believed in the ability of, regional powers to sort out problems like this. So I'm really hoping that Egypt will step in. I'm not too sure that Ethiopia, as of today, has the capacity to do that. So within that region, Egypt and the rest of the Arab world, I think this is a responsibility they must take upon themselves. If they fail to do that, you can be sure that, extra African influences will begin to do that, like the United States or the United Nations itself. But quite frankly, I think that Egypt has the ability, Egypt has the capacity, and they can really go in and get the two sides to a negotiating table.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Joe Keshi. It's been a very insightful interview, and we do hope for the best. Thank you for your insight and your time.